I have finally achieved what no other Index fan has done before. I have solved the mystery behind Kamijo Toma's stupid ass right hand, Imagine Breaker. While we do know a lot more about it thanks to the info in the light novel, there are still a few unknowns that remain, and I believe I've solved one glaring mystery about it. Of course, it's just a theory, but one that can be proved to be very true. I'm gonna run down all the new details we know about Imagine Breaker so far before going on to my mind-blowing theory, so make sure you stick around until the end of the video. First, where did Imagine Breaker even come from? Or how was it created? Terror of the Left seemed to know the answer, but Aqua gave him the pillar treatment. I guess we will never find out what secrets our handsome Joker Venus Flytrap priest knew. However, later in the light novels, Imagine Breaker's purpose is actually revealed as the reference point of the world itself, as it represents the hopes and dreams of all magicians. This may sound weird considering Imagine Breaker is pretty much the quintessential anti-magic weapon, but allow me to explain. Well, it's having the power to destroy supernatural powers is essentially the magician's worst fear. But since magicians are constantly distorting the laws of the world, even if sometimes it's on a small scale, on an individual basis, Imagine Breaker is the lifeline they have to cling on to, and it can restore the world if they mess it up too much by accident. In regards to where it even came from, Imagine Breaker was basically born out of the collective subconscious thoughts of magicians, from their desire and wish to have that security of the world in place. Speaking of magic, this video is sponsored by The Supernatural Case of an Accidental Time Traveler by Paul Tromber, and it's hugely inspired by a certain magical index, and I've had an absolute blast reading it. The story follows Lou Barrett, a pretty ordinary guy, just on his daily commute in London, until he suddenly and mysteriously gets transported to 1888 Whitechapel, which is the year of Jack the Ripper. While struggling to adapt in this new environment, he narrowly survives an attack from supernatural creatures until he is saved by the absolute Giga Chad Scott Langston, a drunken badass with a dark past, who recruits him to an organization known as the Table, who are committed at keeping the peace between the supernatural and the humans. Make sure you check out Accidental Time Traveler. The links are all down below in the description. And I just want to say a massive thank you to Paul for sponsoring this video. Now back to Imagine Breaker. It may have been created by accident via the minds of the magic gods, powerful beings who have actually mastered magic. And this would be like how Will Rejector was made, another mysterious right-hand power used by Kamisato Kakeru, which does the opposite function to Imagine Breaker. Instead of clinging onto the world, Will Rejector rejects it. Who would have thought with a name like that? Acting as the Isekai Truck-kun in the form of a right hand, it sends you to a parallel universe between time, representing the magician's inner desire to leave the current world for a new one. Why does everyone want to be an Isekai protagonist, goddammit? So while Imagine Breaker may have also been created by the magic gods, like Will Rejector was, since they are cut from the same cloth, it hasn't been explicitly stated. Either way, it was either the gods or the collective minds of the entire magic side. Therefore, it's not a huge difference. With its power to strip away magic and clothing, Imagine Breaker is also utilized by magicians as a purification or exorcism tool. Fuyama of the Right, the leader of God's Right Seat, wanted it to cleanse the remainder of his original sin to become the one above God and perfect his holy rites. Furthermore, Imagine Breaker has been used as a means to nullify negative or undesirable effects of a spell or ritual, such as in Genesis Testament Volume 8, where Aradia and Anna Sprengel made Toma use his special right hand on a crystal divination spell, stating that they could make the process of the spell easier to find the information they needed by exercising the summoned power, and it could also stop any of the negative backlash from the spell if things went sour. Samuel Mathers and the Golden Dawn also made use of Imagine Breaker in the form of an arrow. More on that very soon. This time it protected them from the negative effects of the countless phases, known as the sparks and spray, that basically cause predetermined and fated events in the world. As we know from the very first arc, Imagine Breaker can nullify the concept known as the red string of fate. So this effect is pretty consistent in the story, as the Golden Dawn, therefore, were unaffected by fate, so that they could then act accordingly in their efforts to create a magical work kit without disturbance. Basically them trying to bring magic to the mainstream of society by making it easier to learn. How ironic that Alistair stole the arrow and wrecked them despite Mathers attempting to avoid disaster. As yes, Alistair actually used Imagine Breaker as a murder weapon to get revenge on his enemies. After doing this, Imagine Breaker then mysteriously disappeared, and many decades later reappearing in the body of the spaggy-haired boy we all love. Speaking of the Golden Dawn, that's where the other side of my theory takes root, and is what I consider to be pretty exciting for the Index lore if true. Imagine Breaker in the form of a spiritual item arrow I mentioned earlier was actually stated to have originally belonged to a saint. That is, until the Golden Dawn managed to get their hands on it. Imagine Breaker can inhabit both people and objects, although due to the arrow resembling a human arm, it was preserved by a magic side group known as the Wandering Treasure Keepers. They basically specialized in preserving the corpses of important individuals and historic relics, and then the Golden Dawn stole it from them. However, where did the Treasure Keepers get it from, and who was the saint whose right hand was preserved? It is important to note, it wasn't necessarily one of the typical saints we are familiar with in Index, like Kanzaki or Aqua, but instead someone who has the title of a holy person. As it was known as the Treasure of Blythe Road, it was stored in the vault of the Golden Dawn's Isis Urania Temple, intended to be kept hidden from lower ranked members of the Golden Dawn. But since the Cabal and the Battle of Blythe Road were based upon real people and events that happened, what was stored in the vault in real life? Well, allegedly, the corpse of the legendary figure known as Christian Rosenkreutz, the mythical founder of the Rosicrucian occult movement, was stored in the vault, despite the fact it's highly unlikely he was a real person who existed. Therefore, could it be that the Imagine Breaker arrow was the former arm of CRC himself in Index, as there is no reference at all in the novels that CRC or any rumored possessions of his were stored in the temple, which is pretty fishy if you ask me. It could simply be the case that Kamachi didn't want to adapt this part of the Battle of Blythe Road into the story, which is possible considering his version of Blythe Road is very, very different to what happened in reality. Although, owing to CRC being resurrected in the latest arc of the novel, I think it could provide the perfect setup to introduce this hidden detail to the story, and link Toma with the legend of CRC himself. It's the golden opportunity, as Rosenchad is essentially an anti-Toma character. What do I mean by this? Well, CRC in Index was viewed in a very positive light by magicians in the modern day, with tales of a man who would travel around the world healing the sick and helping those in need, acting almost as a savior of humanity. These myths revolving around CRC turned out to be total BS, as he's actually hell-bent on eradicating humanity, who he blames for corrupting the planet itself. This is a stark contrast from Toma, who wants to help and save almost anyone and sees the good in people, even if they are mass murdering terrorists. You do you, Toma. Nevertheless, while Toma doesn't view himself as a savior, unlike Fuyama and CRC, he arguably does have a savior complex, where he feels it is his purpose in life to save as many people as humanly possible. I mean, isn't it poetic if true that Imagine Breaker was once used for evil when CRC was allegedly still alive, as opposed to being a force of good in the hands of Toma? Not to mention, Imagine Breaker chooses its host based upon who it deems to be best suited to wield it. As often is said, Imagine Breaker takes on many different forms depending on the era and location. You are literally trash, but killing you and having it reside somewhere else could be a problem. And since CRC was viewed as a savior who could solve problems wherever he went, and maybe Imagine Breaker would find itself in him despite his true nature. With the magic side origins and links to the Golden Dawn, which was inspired by the Rosicrucian movement, which CRC was the founder of, I think there's a decent amount of evidence pointing to this direction. Although it remains to be seen if CRC did truly exist or not, considering his ambiguous existence, which might be similar to that of Anna Sprengel, as we don't yet know where she even came from either. Maybe there is another world or phase we don't know about yet, which acts as a fictional world, and CRC was the wielder of Imagine Breaker in this reality, as it's not like Anna and CRC are just fakes wearing cosplay, like how the other Transcendents are in the Bridge Builders Cabal. Regardless, the upcoming volume of Index, Genesis Testament 9, will likely spill the beans if there is indeed a link between CRC and Toma. And most likely Aleister Crowley will know the details, since this dude turned demon waifu seemingly knows everything there is to know about Imagine Breaker, including the stuff inside it I didn't mention. Speaking of that, if you'd like to learn about Toma's other powers, click on these videos on screen right now and let me know down below what you think about my theory. Until next time.